guys, today I have a book haul for you guys. I do try and thrift all of my books, so these are some thrifted books that I have found recently. When I say thrift, I do mean at a traditional thrift store, and then also I do go to my local half-price books, and I always just pick books from their clearance section, and I found some really good bestsellers that I'm super excited about. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first book I have here is actually going to be a reread, and this is 8,000 Splendid Suns. So this is by the same author as The Kite Runner. The Kite Runner is one of my favorite books. I had to read it for required reading in 9th grade, and literally it affected like the whole entire class. Like kids who never read the books were reading ahead, and like it broke all of our hearts and also taught us like such valuable lessons. So I did read 1,000 Splendid Suns when I was probably like 16, and I don't really remember a lot of what it's about except that it was very impactful, much like The Kite Runner. So just a quick summary, this is about 3 young women, and they are in Afghanistan under Taliban rule, and just kind of everything that they're having to struggle with. The author, Khaled Hosseini, he is Afghan himself, and so he brings a lot of awareness of everything that is happening and happened in Afghanistan and kind of the injustices, and so it's really eye-opening, and it especially makes you realize your privilege of living in America. The next book I have is a YA book. This is called I Was Here by Gayle Forman. This is the same author of If I Stay and Frankie and Bug, which was I think her most recent release. So I had read both of those books and I really did enjoy them. I love reading YA. This is about a girl named Cody. Cody's best friend Meg drank industrial strength cleaner alone in her motel room to kill herself, and Meg's going back to kind of like pick up the pieces and solve the mystery as to why she did that. I read a book kind of similar to that premise recently, but we'll see. I never mind if books are kind of similar in plot as long as they're well executed. So we'll see about that. Next up, we have a Sophie Kinsella book. This is the same author as Confessions of a Shopaholic. This is called 20s Girl. I got this just at like a regular thrift store. I don't think I've read Confessions of a Shopaholic, but I know I have it. So this is kind of like a silly mystery, if you will. You guys can see on the front cover there is like a necklace, a dragonfly necklace. So it's about a main character named Laura Linton, and she has an overactive imagination. She thinks that a ghost is visiting her, and Laura's great aunt Sadie is asking Laura to look for her necklace. So seems like a light read. Sometimes I just need those lighter, sillier reads to break up kind of the more like intense, serious books that I read. Because if I just read a bunch of like really intense, really emotional books, like I get sad. So sometimes I do just need those quick books. This is something that I found in the half price clearance section. This is called Outlawed. This is by Anna North, and this was a Reese Book Club pick. I am so persuaded by the Reese Book Club emblem, but I honestly don't really like a lot of the picks, so I need to stop being persuaded by that, but oh well. So this takes place in 1894. It follows our main character, Ada. She joins up with the notorious Hole in the Wall gang, which is a band of outlaws led by the preacher turned robber known to all as Kid. So definitely seems like kind of like a more light read, definitely an adventure. And it kind of reminds me of another Reese Book Club pick, which was called Lucky, but this one is a Western, whereas Lucky was set in the modern day, just kind of like silly antics. Next up, we have an Amor Towles book. I have read another book by this author, and I really liked listening to his Read with Jenna podcast episode. This is called The Lincoln Highway, and this is the book of the month version, but I just got this at my local half-price books. This was from October of 2021, book of the month, and it is definitely very thick. So this takes place in June of 1954, and this follows a boy named Emmett. Emmett has recently been released from a juvenile home, and he's trying to go back to his hometown to see his brother, and unbeknownst to Emmett at first, 2 of the boys from the juvenile home sneak into the car with them, and then they travel along the Lincoln Highway. Amor Towles, he writes a lot of historical fiction. The other book I read by him was called Rules of Civility, and I really did enjoy that one as well. So I am really excited to get into this one. I know it's like really, really critically acclaimed, so excited about that. We have another book of the month edition. Book of the month editions of things are definitely something that like draws my eye. I'm more inclined to get it if it is a book of the month edition. This was from November 2019. This is called The Giver of Stars and it's by Jojo Moyes. This is the same author as Me Before You, and I also read another book called In Her Shoes by this author, and honestly her books are kind of like lackluster to me. I like them, but I don't think they're the best books ever, so it's kind of like my last attempt to get into Jojo Moyes, and we'll see what happens. This is set in the Great Depression era America, which is different than the other two books that I read by her. The other two books that I did read by Jojo Moyes were realistic fiction that were set in modern day. So it says that this is based on a true story. It follows a woman named Alice Wright. She marries a handsome American man. Alice Wright is from England and her American man is from Kentucky. So they move together to Kentucky and Alice kind of has like a culture shock. She doesn't really end up liking Kentucky all that much at first. It just seems like it's really claustrophobic, and she especially doesn't like living alongside her overbearing father-in-law. So when a call goes out for a team of women to deliver books as part of Eleanor Roosevelt's new traveling library, Alice signs on enthusiastically, and then the story takes off from there. Another book of the month pick. I've never heard of this one before. I just saw it and I saw book of the month and I read the little blurb and I was persuaded to get it. So this is from June of 2021. This is by McKenzie and it's called Skye Falling. It is about a woman named Skye. When Skye was 26 years old, she sold some of her eggs and she just needed cash really happily. And she didn't really think about like, hey, what's gonna happen? Like someone's gonna use my eggs to fertilize them and then have a child with them. And so now when she's 40, she kind of is like, oh shit, I did that. And now she's seeking out the child or children that were made with her eggs and kind of just wants to connect with that child. Another book of the month pick. This one is called The Most Likely Club. This is contemporary fiction is what it says on the back, but it doesn't say what month or year this pick is from. This is by Elyssa Friedland. At their milestone high school reunion, a group of friends make a pact to finally achieve their high school superlatives one way or another. So it looks like they went to school and they graduated from high school in 1997. And now fast forward 25 years later and nothing has gone according to anyone's plan as the women regroup at their dreaded high school reunion. So just kind of the most likely two girls, and this seems like another lighter, fun read. I was really excited to find this at my half price clearance section. This is called The Dutch House. This is by Ann Patchett. I have a bunch of Ann Patchett books, but honestly, I've only read her most recent one, Tom Lake. If you are looking to listen to the audiobook, The Dutch House is narrated by Tom Hanks, so definitely a good audiobook to check out. But I tried to listen to it and I was just way too distractible. When it comes to audiobooks, I really only like to listen to memoirs or historical fiction, which this is historical fiction of sorts, but I just couldn't get into it. So I am going to try and read it because I know that it has a lot of acclaim. This takes place over the course of 5 decades. The Dutch House is a dark fairy tale about two smart people who cannot overcome their past. Despite every outward sign of success, Danny and Maeve, who are siblings, are only truly comfortable when they're together. Throughout their lives, they return to the well-worn narrative of what they've lost with humor and rage. But when at last they're forced to confront the people who left them behind, the relationship between an indulged brother and his overprotected sister is finally tested. So basically it says what happens is Danny and Maeve's dad marries a new woman. The new woman makes them sell their Dutch house and kind of like kicks them to the curb, you know, new family. So just kind of dealing with that. So I love it when books span generations and you really see the character development, so I'm very excited to read this one. Another book of the month pick. This one is historical fiction. This is from January of 2022. This is called The Magnolia Palace. This is by Fiona Davis. I have listened to a Fiona Davis audiobook, but if you ask me which one, I'm like, ooh. I know that she's kind of known for doing like the past present storyline, and I didn't really enjoy it that much, but I was willing to give it another chance. And look, I got a book of the month bookmark, so that's always a good perk. Oh yeah, the one that I listened to was The Lions of Fifth Avenue. It literally says the best-selling author of The Lions of Fifth Avenue. I did listen to that one. It was about a library and it was okay. I didn't have like super complaints about it, but it just wasn't all that interesting. So this seems like it's going to be another past-present storyline. So the past is in 1919 and it follows a girl named Lillian. Lillian was a model. She went by the name Angelina whenever she was modeling. And Lillian has recently lost her mother to the Spanish flu outbreak. So Lillian's having to deal with that, and then she starts working at a building called the Frick Mansion, and she works as a private secretary to Helen Frick, the daughter and heiress of industrial and art patron Henry Clay Frick. And so her life becomes like intertwined with them. In the future storyline, it's 50 years later from 1919, so like 1969. English model Veronica Weber has her own chance to make her career and with it earn the money that she needs to support her family back home. Within the walls of the former Frick residence, now converted into one of New York City's most impressive museums. But when she, along with a charming intern slash budding art curator named Joshua, is dismissed from the Vogue shoot taking place in the Frick collection, she chances upon a series of hidden messages in the museum. So like a mystery. Next up we have a reread, and this one has definitely seen some love. The spine is all cracked. This is a Jodi Picoult book. Jodi Picoult is one of my favorite authors. I read all of her books when I was a teenager, and so now I'm kind of going back through some of the ones that I remember as being my favorite. So this one's called Change of Heart. And I love Jodi Picoult books because they always make me think about like where I am politically, morally, like would I do that? This book follows a mom named Jewel Nielsen. June's husband and daughter were murdered by Shea Bourne. So Shea Bourne is now on death row. And June is waiting for a miracle to heal her and bring her some kind of justice. So June's other daughter, Claire, who is still alive, offers June a way to fix her heart, and I don't want to give too much away because I do remember what happens, and it's really compelling. That's all I'll say. I know that didn't sound super compelling, but very compelling. The next one is just something that I picked up because it looked interesting. It's called Good Girls Lie. I've never really heard anything about it. It's by J.T. Ellison. This book is about an elite private school called the Good School, also known as Silent Ivy. It only accepts the best and the brightest, so I love a good boarding school mystery. It makes me think of the series Private. I read that growing up. I think it's by Kate Bryant, and I absolutely love that series. I devoured it, so I'm getting similar vibes here. Next book is something that I got at a free library in Boston. This is called 800 Grapes. This is by Laura Dave. This follows our main character named Georgia. Georgia lives in Sonoma County in a vineyard, and she has a lot of secrets, it says. So Georgia is a week away from her wedding. She's 30 years old, and a week away from her wedding, she discovers that her fiance has a huge secret. Next up we have a Read with Jenna pick. I like Read with Jenna picks a little bit more than Reese picks is what I've noticed. This one is called White Ivy, and if you guys don't know, Read with Jenna also has a podcast and I really love it. And this is by Susie Yang. So this is about a woman named Ivy Lynn. She's a Chinese immigrant and she lives in a low-income apartment in Massachusetts. She develops a crush on the golden boy named Gideon Spire, and he's very like waspy and just kind of like the American dream, if you will. So Ivy grows up with an overbearing mom called Tiger Mom, and a grandmother who teaches her kind of the wilder side of life, such as shoplifting. So as a grown adult, Ivy runs into Gideon Spire's sister, and she believes that it's destiny and that her and Gideon are supposed to be together. So it seems like maybe like a domestic thriller. Up next, I have another Laura Dave pick. This is called The Divorce Party. This book is about two women. Our first character's name is Gwen Huntington, and she is throwing herself a divorce party after being married for 35 years. And then it's also about Gwen's future daughter-in-law named Maggie McKenzie. It's their first time meeting is at the divorce party, so it seems like that's kind of uncomfortable. Like, hey, I'm about to get married to your son and you're kind of like making a mockery out of marriage by having a divorce party. And if any of you guys are Real Housewives fans, I just watched the episode of Real Housewives of at Atlanta where Kenya throws Phaedra and Cynthia a divorce party and like Phaedra gets so upset. So that's what that made me think of. Next up we have a Good Morning America book club pick. This is called The Personal Librarian. This is historical fiction. This is by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. In her 20s, Belle de la Cosa Green is hired by J.P. Morgan to curate a collection of rare manuscripts, books, and artwork for his newly built Pierpont Morgan Library. Belle becomes a fixture in the New York City society and one of the most powerful people in the art and book world, known for her impeccable taste and shrewd negotiating for critical works as she helps create a world-class collection. But Belle has a secret, one she must protect at all costs. She was not born Belle de la Cosa Green, but Belle Marion Greener. She's the daughter of Richard Greener, the first black graduate of Harvard and a well-known advocate for equality. Belle's complexion isn't dark because of her alleged Portuguese heritage that lets her pass as white. Her complexion is dark because she is black. So obviously it's about a woman who is trying to pass as white because, of course, back in these days there was a lot of discrimination still and segregation. So it makes me think of like The Vanishing Half, which is a story that I really enjoyed about twins who have to pass, and I just find it really interesting. This next book is called Darling Girl. This is by Liz Michalski, and I've heard pretty negative things about this. It's a Peter Pan retelling, but I don't know, I was curious and it was only a few dollars. So this is about the granddaughter of Wendy Darling. Her name is Holly Darling. Holly Darling is running a successful skincare company. Her son Jack is happy and healthy, and she says the tragedy of her past is well behind her until she gets a call from her daughter Eden, who has been in a coma for nearly a decade and has gone missing from the estate where she's been long tucked away. But worst of all, she knows that Peter Pan is real and dangerous. So that sounds like an adventure. I love Peter Pan. It's one of my favorite stories, but I've heard that this like ruins Peter Pan for you and that it never should have been published. So I don't know if that's super high on my list of reads. Next up we have another book that I got at a Boston Free Library. This is The Lord of the Flies. I've actually never read this. I know it's required reading in a lot of states, but it wasn't for me. I think it was on like a big list of books that we got. By the time I became a junior in high school, instead of assigning us just like one book to read, they give us a list of classics and then we had to go through and pick. And this is definitely on there, but I didn't pick this one. But this is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This was published in 1954, and it says it remains one of the greatest books ever written for young adults and an unforgettable classic for readers of any age. So I'm hoping that holds up. Sometimes the classics I don't personally really like. It says, at the dawn of the next world war, a plane crashes on an uncharted island, stranding a group of schoolboys. At first, with no adult supervision, their freedom is something to celebrate. This far from civilization, they can do anything they want. Anything. But as order collapses, as strange howls echo in the night, as terror begins its reign, the hope of adventure seems as far removed from reality as the hope of being rescued. So definitely a thriller. Kind of reminds me of like Patchett in a way, of just like being stranded. And then we have Younger. Yes, it is the same Younger as the TV show. I did really enjoy the TV show. I didn't ever finish it, but I watched at least like the first 2 seasons. And yes, part of the reason why I was so inclined to try it out and watch it is because I knew Hilary Duff was in it. Big Lizzie McGuire fan from back in the day. So Younger by Pamela Redmond. This is about Alice. Alice is trying to get a job in publishing after raising her daughter and basically having no work experience for quite some time because she was raising her daughter. And so it's been 15 years since she's worked in the publishing industry. She's noticing like no one's hiring her because she has that gap and just because they're being kind of like ageist. So she gets a compliment that she looks much younger than she actually is, and she goes with it. In this show, I will say, like, the actress, she looks great, but she doesn't look nearly as young as they try and portray her. So I always thought that was kind of funny. Like, no, she doesn't look quite that young, so you do have to suspend reality when you're watching the show. Next up, we have a Good Morning America pick. This is called Micah in Real Life. This is by Emiko Jean. This is about a woman named Micah. She's 35 years old, and it compares her life to a Jenga tower. She's just kind of like not where she thought she would be at 35. She has failed relationships. She's a disappointment to her Japanese parents who are very traditional, and her roommate slash best friend might be a hoarder. So kind of a lot going on, but everything changes when Micah gets a call from the daughter that she put up for adoption 16 years ago named Penny, and Micah wants to seem put together for Penny, the daughter that she put up for adoption. She wants to seem like she has it put together, so she's kind of like scrambling to get her life together to seem like a really good role model. The last book that I do have here is a young adult book. This won the John Newbery Medal, which is like the best award you can get in that young adult category. This is Kira Kira, and I've seen this forever. I think it was published when I was a kid, but I never did read it. So when I saw it at the thrift store, I was like, oh, that's interesting. This is by Cynthia Kadohata. It doesn't really tell me a lot of the summary of the book, but it gives an intriguing excerpt on the back. So it says, my uncle was exactly 1 inch taller than my father, but his stomach was soft. We knew this because we hit him in it once the year before, and he yelped in pain and threatened to spank us. We got sent to bed without supper because my parents said hitting someone was the worst thing you could do. Stealing was the second, and lying was the third. Before I was 12, I would have committed all 3 of those crimes. Interesting. Those are all of the books that I have acquired recently. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books. I will leave all of the titles of the books down below in the description box. And if you did enjoy this video, please do make sure that you give it a thumbs up and you hit the subscribe button. I will see you guys next video.